congressional or Connecticut Democrat, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, is behind a House bill that will try to entice that foreign money to hire these unemployed people to rebuild this infrastructure. She has been pushing for an infrastructure bank for, by the way, 17 years. Meanwhile, as you can see here, Oklahoma City Mayor Republican Mick Cornett is a national advocate for infrastructure investment on a municipal level. Rosa, do you have any more of a belief or reason to believe that an infrastructure bank that brings money from overseas back to hire people to build infrastructure is any more viable or politically achievable today than it has been the past 17 years?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the program. I think we've got a couple of different issues here. You're talking about U.S. corporations with their, that keep their money overseas and have to be enticed by way of bringing it back in some way. What I've been talking about is an infrastructure bank which takes public investment of capital plus private capital, which, yes, can come from pension funds, it can come from sovereign wealth funds, it can come from other foreign investors who would purchase bonds from a bank, literally from a bank, that then would be used, the funding would be used in order to work with a municipality like Mayor Cornett's, or a state government, or a private entities, and be engaged in projects of national significance.
Got it. Mr. Mayor, desperate need for infrastructure. If you look at the percentages of what we spend in this country, can you give me some proportionality, some way for me or for my mother to understand just how desperate the municipal need for infrastructure investment is?
Well, it's large, especially in those older eastern cities that you referred to that are still dealing with 19th century infrastructure. Look, we can all argue about how we're going to pay for this, but the need for infrastructure is a big concern for all Americans. We are not going to be able to hand this country off to the next generation in good faith if we don't start addressing some of the needs at our airports and some of the needs at our water systems, and certainly at our nation's highways. In Oklahoma City, our airport's in good shape, our water system's in good shape, but our highway system is a mess, and it takes so long for departments of transportation across the country to complete projects. It's not that they lack the expertise or the engineering capabilities, they simply lack the money. And if this process can get the money to the cities and the states that need it, it's going to be a great investment, and it's going to put people back to work.
And to that end, Congressman DeLauro, do we have any sense of how many jobs could be created through a significant investment in infrastructure in America?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the mayor's absolutely right. I think we need to work out the financing of an infrastructure bank. The need is critical. First of all, it is an engine of growth for the nation. It is, and the infrastructure bank would cover roads, bridges, water systems, telecommunications, energy. These are all areas that we not only can create jobs from, but we deal with technology as well and create jobs via that vehicle as well. And it has been understood that I think for every $1 billion you're looking at hundreds of thousands of jobs that are created. And these are jobs that cannot be outsourced. That is what's about, and the bank being able to do this, it takes it out of the realm of politics. As you understand it, people talk about earmarks and pork, etc. This is about identifying projects that are going to be good nationwide, whether they're environmental, whether they're economic, whether they're energy focused, so that we can rebuild this country, create jobs for the future.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you, obviously, that the big challenge is coming up with the financing mechanism, whether it's having to bribe the corporations through tax incentives to bring the money back, or whether you're harnessing the money some other mechanism. Obviously, the absence of the money, which is ironic when you consider the trillions that we subsidize the American banking system with every day, that we're desperate to find, that we're scraping for pennies for our own bridges, which confuses me, but that's for a different TV show. The other barrier, however, Mr. Mayor, is the public skepticism of the integrity of the process of allocation. Later in the show today, we're going to talk about Afghanistan. And what we're going to talk about is the amount of money that the American government is spending 10 times what the going rate is to people who are not doing the jobs that they're being paid to do. That has been one of the great concerns of the government in general in recent years is, okay, we give you the financing for this infrastructure bank, but who decides which projects get financing, and what's to keep the Democrats, if they're in power, from giving the money to their friends that are Democrats in cities like Oklahoma and elsewhere, and what's to prevent the Republicans from doing the exact same thing if they're the ones in power, and in the process completely compromise the actual process. So set aside financing, how can you win the confidence of the American people that were we to come up with the financing, that the money would be invested in a way that the priorities had integrity?
Well, at this point, the need is so great in so many different places, it would be hard to not make a good investment. We cannot afford to hand the next generation the current level of infrastructure and the priorities that we've currently put in place. You cannot expect the private sector to invest in a city that has decaying infrastructure. The private sector is going to want good streets and a good airport and a water system that their employees are going to be able to count on. This is reaching a critical level of concern for the American people. Think back to your childhood, Dylan. You remember when big projects like the Golden Gate Bridge, maybe you're not that old, but projects of that magnitude were constructed. We used to be the country that built stuff. We don't build things anymore. We fund entirely too many social programs. We find out our unemployment lines are getting longer and longer at too many cities across the country. We've got to help put people back to work. We've got to keep building stuff and invest in our infrastructure.
But forget the social programs. We're funding $1 trillion worth of war. Meanwhile, the war is not functioning. We give trillions to banks that don't lend to us. We empower health insurance monopolies that don't provide health insurance. And for that matter, we just spent $1 trillion on a drug war over the past 10 years, and drug consumption is up across the board. So both of your point is we need better capital allocation. I think this is a sensational idea. I applaud both of you for taking up the issue. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to make this better understood. We do need to have the financing to create the jobs. We can kill multiple birds with one stone. It's the sort of thing that a 21st century solution looks like. You do one thing, it solves three things at the same time, that then creates an orchestra, an environment of prosperity in cities like Oklahoma City, Oakland, wherever it may be. And I applaud both of you for your investment and your commitment to this issue. Congresswoman, please keep us posted on your legislation. Mr. Mayor, we'll talk to you sooner rather than later. Thank you both, and compliments to both of you for trying to tackle this incredibly important issue that can create jobs for all of us. Get the money to the places that it needs to be so that we can get people back to work and get America renovated as it needs to be. Still ahead here today.